at the top of our competitive streaks, and we really didn't have anyone else to identify with, so we got each other through it. So thanks, Rodney.
Thank you.
Look at these friends. I love it. And why don't we start there? So how did you guys first connect? You both started young, you've had similar careers but in different directions. How did you connect? What was the spark?
I saw Rodney at a competition at my local park, and he was this unknown, scrappy kid from Florida that was coming in, and there was just all this buzz about this kid that you won't believe what he does. And I watched him skate, and he did, what is considered like an Olympic precision, perfect routine. And I was like, that's that watch right there. Yeah.
Did you know you were scrappy?
Oh my goodness. The thing about Tony is like this wonder kid, and I would skate all day, and the treat for me was going up and watching him in the bowls and just practicing. And how rapidly he learns.
Yeah.
That to me, no one inspired me more since I was a kid.
So you found this kinship, and you've both been phenomenal successes. When you look at the sport now, they always say this about people who've been there and done it. We go, well, it's not as good as it was in our day. Do you look at the sport now and think it's changed for the better, or not?
Oh, it's far better in terms of recognition, in terms of validation, in terms of opportunity.
Yeah.
It's going to be the Olympics next year. If you told us that it was the Olympics when we were kids, we would have never ever believed you. It's just not. The attitude towards skating was it's for losers, it's for outcasts,
right.
And it's time to get a job.
And it was so interesting to hear you say you felt like an outcast in an outcast community. That's just a double trouble. But look what you did with that. I love the fact that you went out and you found people just like you.
Well, I'll tell you what I didn't get to was that it really did set me up for the onslaught of social media. Because when people started, of course there's a lot of hate out there, and people love to say vile things, but they're hiding it behind these anonymous usernames. They used to say that to my face.
Right.
You're not getting through here.
I love that. They were braver back in those days. Rodney, tell us a bit about the work you've done with the IBM Cloud for VMware Solutions team. How did that partnership start?
Oh, it was the best. So I did a little talk in Vegas with Tony, very similar. I get off stage, and this wild-eyed, I come to find out, CTO of VMware, Simon, he goes, "You strike me like a wild duck. I'm a wild duck, and around here, it's always hunting season. Let's do something together." So he locked on to that slide of the molecules and the vocabulary, and saw how that could immediately translate what we do in an uncommon way. The tricks went to text, which for machine learning it would eat up to feed an AI, and thus I got to work with a small and awesome team called the Watson team,
nice.
Chris Moss especially, and we created a chatbot that's really cool.
So tell us a bit more about that product. What have you guys created? And this is all underpinned by IBM Watson, right?
Yes, phenomenal. Yeah,
So the Watson fact right there, where was that? Yeah. There we are.
So the chatbot itself, I structured the language because, again, as the nomenclature works, if you structure it a certain way, then the machine you could code it so that it can predict all the tricks that we do.
Wow.
Based on simple rules. It's that powerful, the nomenclature. Very unusual. So we did that. We let it learn. It starts out kind of like an infant. And then it starts to put together these combinations of trick names that were astounding to me. It thinks very differently than we do. Some of them made logical sense based on the simple rules, but in other ways there was a naivete to them that clearly couldn't be done. But in other ways I would be surprised. I'm like, why didn't I think of that at least? And then we married it with, we were doing a talk in Barcelona in the local skate spots. So geolocated, if you had ideas for a given trick, it would suggest not only spots, but iterate according to difficulty so you could progress the tricks. Phenomenal tool for creativity.
Sounds very, very cool. People love it. So, Tony, one of the big themes of IBM Think this week is giving back. Your foundation is phenomenal. Can you give us a bit more detail? What's it up to at the moment?
Sure, yeah, well, like you said, we've been going for 17 years now. We've helped to develop over 600 parks across the US. We have an international partnership with Skateistan that does ski projects in South Africa, in Afghanistan, and in Cambodia. And the beautiful thing about their program is that in the areas where they go, there's no preconceived notions about skateboarding being male dominated. So, for instance, in Afghanistan, they have this loophole that girls are not supposed to, there's those co-ed sports in Afghanistan. Girls are not supposed to be playing sports, but they consider skateboarding a toy. And so they're welcome to do it. And so the ratio of boys to girls in the Afghanistan skate community is 1-to-1.
Wow.
Which is pretty fascinating.
What is it in the Western world?
Wow. I would say 5-to-1 is generous.
Very generous.
Yeah.
But so, and really what we want to do is we try to empower communities that are trying to get parks going themselves. It's not like we walk in with a magic wand and say, this small town needs a skate park, and here you go, we get the accolades. We want to empower the groups that are already getting the ball rolling, give them the resources, and show them the right way to do it.
To me, that's fantastic because you're combining the love of the sport with giving back and making a difference. And Rodney, I was just thinking about your story. Your background is math and engineering, and how phenomenal that you can now combine those things with what you also love, the world of skateboarding, the language of skateboarding.
And the combination with the notion of open source. When I found Linux and how those communities work together, phenomenal. Feels like home.
So I want to ask you, because again, while I'm with you, Rodney, I think this is amazing. You've invented so many of the tricks. But as much as it might look a little bit like freewheeling, you see how much experimentation you do, you know what the forces are, the forces that are at play. Can you tell us more about the art and, in fact, the science of creating those tricks, and are there new ones to be created?
I think there are always new ones to create. I think one of the benefits that Tony and I did have in those early days, it was more of a blank canvas, where we had the, again, benefit of being able to swish around so much and create new things that people had done. Now everyone's so good and the combinations are so much. The flip side is that they never end the iterations of tricks of terrain. That's the joy of it. And also I think that syllabic nature, the way I often practice is you work on one subtle movement and see how it catenates with another and watch the momentum fall. That's a joy. That's both an art and a science.
I'm wondering how many skateboarders out there in the skate parks ever use the word catenate. But either way, I was glad you did. Tony, you told us a little bit about the start, the birth of the video game side of your business. When you walked in that day dressed like a skateboarder and you saw the Bruce Willis bit, did you ever imagine where it would lead?
No, not at all. In fact, when they started talking about a sequel, I thought that was bigger success than I could have ever imagined. And fast forward to almost 15 iterations later, and we got to develop as the consoles got better and as home video games became bigger than the music industry, or the movie industry. We got to ride that wave, and it was incredible. I mean, it changed my life completely. At one point, I would meet parents that said, my kid thinks that you're named after Tony Hawk video game.
That's brilliant. That's a true honor. But can you take us a tiny bit behind the scenes when you're creating a game? What's the process? So do a bunch of developers sit there, show you something, go, is this good? And you're like, no, it would never happen like that. Or is it in reverse?
There was a very steep learning curve in the beginning because I was working with Neversoft as a developer, and they didn't know anything about skating. So I had to teach them nuances of front side and back side and how these tricks work. And then at some point, they got into it. They started getting all the underground videos. They were taking a weekly skate trip to the park with the whole crew.
With cameras and equipment, or just watching?
No, going to skate.
Oh, they were going to skate?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, they had an internal office kickflip contest. One guy broke his ankle. But they dove in and they learned everything about it, and then I didn't have to. Those conversations didn't exist anymore. Then we got into the really nitty gritty of what the trick should look like and what the locations and the challenges should be. But they were very receptive. I was thankful. And the process back then was that they would send me a burned CD of the newest build, FedEx it to me. I'd play it in my modified PlayStation, give feedback, and then we would go out on that. Now it's downloaded, 5 gig file.
I know, it's remarkable, and it'll keep changing. You mentioned the art of falling, and I can feel an analogy in the room, because there are many people here, like myself, who are just never going to get on a skateboard. But in business, we might fall, we might fail. What advice can you give us about the art of falling and then, of course, the art of getting back up?
It's a good question. It's a remarkably analytic process of inuring. So that you look at what's the worst that can happen, because there's always that, something you cannot recover from. Whatever you do, fall in such a way to avoid that and gradually kind of move in and then build up within that framework, and then you start jumping over. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. So I want to kind of round this up now with what happens next, and also a touch on social media. Tony, 11 million followers, is that right?
I guess so.
Something in that region.
Combined, sure.
How does one manage such a size of follower? I mean, do you have a strategy, or do you occasionally respond, or just let it live on its own?
With great power. No. No, I do it. I just try to do it naturally. I just try to be interesting, entertaining. You know, I find myself in really unique situations, and I feel like I want to share that with people, and instead of just, you know, I got coffee. No offense, anyone who's posting pictures of coffee. That's not my scene. But yeah, and eventually learned to. I mean, I joined Twitter very early on, and at some point I realized how prolific it was, where the news was traveling faster there than almost anywhere else.
Right.
And I was driving to my office, and I thought, what if I just throw a skateboard out the window right here and tell people where it is? And I did. I stashed a skateboard behind a fire hydrant in this cul-de-sac, tweeted out where it was. By the time I got to my office, someone had found it, and 10 other people were arriving to try to find it. And I just thought, God, this is really an amazing tool. And I think that's when I truly embraced how far-reaching it is and how to connect with people who are using it.
And is it true that you're going to be shortly tweeting out where stacks of hundreds are going to be placed?
If you give them to me to hide.
Okay, right. That sounds like a good deal.
IBM, kick down, let's do this.
All right, big bird. We'll sort that afterwards. All right, final question. Our time is almost up. What's next, both of you? Rodney, you first.
Wow.
You don't need stage lighting anymore, by the way. Yes.
I'm in a new video game, which I'm working on. That's kind of cool. And I have a relationship with MIT. I'll be working a lot soon.
Fantastic. In Boston. And Tony, what's next for you, sir?
Well, hopefully more skating, if I'm still physically capable of it. And,
Yes.
I do a lot of stuff with my foundation. I was helping to usher in the Olympic movement, and so I don't know what my role will be there now that it's actually happening, but I'm hoping to be on the mic at least in Tokyo in 2020, and just riding this out, creating the dream. You know, this is everything now is just sort of a nice surprise.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Rodney Mullens.